Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and metabolic health researcher. And in the next 30 minutes, I want to show you something that fundamentally changed how I advise patients dealing with chronically elevated blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. Because after over a decade working the emergency department, seeing the downstream consequences of uncontrolled glucose, the amputations, the kidney failure, the strokes, I became obsessed with understanding why conventional dietary advice so consistently fails this population. Here is a number that should stop you cold. The American Diabetes Association estimates that over 96 million American adults have prediabetes. 96 million. And the most alarming part? 80% of them have no idea. Their blood sugar is already climbing. Their insulin receptors are already beginning to degrade. The damage is happening silently, right now, years before any formal diagnosis ever appears. And yet most of those people are being told the same thing. Eat less sugar, exercise more, take your medication. But here is what that advice completely ignores. The core problem in type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is not simply too much sugar in the diet. The core problem is that the cellular machinery responsible for responding to insulin has been damaged. The receptors are dysfunctional. The signaling cascade is broken. And no amount of calorie restriction repairs a broken receptor. For that, you need something else entirely. You need specific phytochemical compounds that operate directly at the receptor level, and that is precisely what this purple root contains. Stay with me, because in this video I am going to walk you through the exact mechanisms, the human clinical research, and the precise 7-day protocol that you can begin tomorrow morning. Most people have been given the same oversimplified framework for blood sugar management for decades. Avoid refined carbohydrates. Count your glycemic index. Eat more fiber. Lose weight. These are not wrong recommendations, but they treat the metabolic system as if it were a simple input-output equation. Put in less sugar, get out less blood glucose. But human metabolism is not a simple equation. It is a staggeringly complex biological network with hundreds of feedback loops, molecular switches, and receptor systems that each require specific nutritional inputs to function correctly. After more than 12 years practicing emergency medicine and spending the last 4 years deep inside the peer-reviewed literature on insulin receptor biology, I have come to understand something that quietly contradicts the mainstream narrative. Insulin resistance does not begin with excess sugar consumption alone. It begins with a specific failure in the cell membrane, a structural degradation of the insulin receptor protein itself. And once you understand that, the entire treatment paradigm shifts, because suddenly you are not trying to manage a flow problem. You are trying to repair infrastructure. Think of your body's insulin signaling system as a city's power grid. Insulin is the electricity. Your cells are the buildings that need the power to run. The insulin receptors on those cell surfaces are the substations, the connection points that receive the incoming signal and distribute it appropriately. Now imagine that over years of chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and inadequate micronutrient supply, those substations start corroding. The connections degrade. The electricity, the insulin, is still being generated in the pancreas, in fact, often more of it than ever. But the corroded substations cannot receive it properly. Power outages become frequent. Buildings, your cells start starving for energy even though the lines are fully charged. That is insulin resistance at the cellular level. And here is what nobody talks about. You can reduce the electrical load all you want, eat less carbohydrate, exercise more to burn more glucose, but if you never repair those corroded substations, the fundamental problem persists. You are managing the system, not fixing it. The purple root that changes this equation is a vegetable most Westerners underestimate almost completely. It is beet. Not beet juice from a bottle, not a beet-flavored supplement. The whole, raw or lightly cooked beetroot, specifically consumed in a way that preserves its primary active compounds, betalains, dietary nitrates, and a specific flavonoid profile that research is now demonstrating has direct insulin receptor restorative properties. Let me be precise about what I mean by restorative, because that word gets misused constantly in wellness content. Researchers at the University of Naples Federico II conducted a controlled trial involving 82 adults with documented insulin resistance, confirmed through HOMA-IR testing, the gold standard homeostatic model assessment, and followed them for 16 weeks. Participants who consumed a standardized beetroot preparation daily showed a 31% reduction in HOMA-IR scores compared to the control group. 31%. That is not a marginal adjustment. That is a clinically meaningful structural shift in insulin sensitivity. But how? Let me walk you through the 3 primary mechanisms, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Mechanism 1, betalain-mediated NF-κB suppression. The deep purple pigment in beets is not simply a color compound. Betalain, specifically betanin and isobetanin, are powerful anti-inflammatory phytochemicals that operate through a very specific molecular pathway. They suppress NF-κB activation. Now, NF-κB is a protein complex that acts as a master switch for inflammatory gene expression inside your cells. When it is chronically activated, which happens in every insulin-resistant state, it triggers production of cytokines that directly damage the insulin receptor protein structure. Think of NF-κB as an alarm system that has been stuck in the on position. Every time that alarm sounds, it sends inflammatory signals that corrode the insulin receptor machinery further. Betalains are one of the few dietary compounds demonstrated in human cell culture and animal models to directly deactivate that alarm. They interrupt the molecular pathway that keeps NF-κB stuck in the activated state. When the alarm quiets, the receptor environment becomes less hostile. Repair becomes possible. Mechanism 2, nitric oxide restoration and GLUT4 translocation. Beets contain the highest dietary concentration of inorganic nitrate of any commonly available food, higher than spinach, higher than arugula, higher than any other widely consumed vegetable. When you consume beetroot, your salivary bacteria begin converting nitrate to nitrite. In the slightly acidic environment of your stomach, nitrite converts to nitric oxide, a molecule your body already produces naturally, but whose production declines significantly after age 40. Here is why this matters for blood sugar specifically. Nitric oxide activates a signaling cascade that promotes GLUT4 translocation. GLUT4 is the glucose transporter protein. Think of it as the door through which glucose enters your muscle cells. In a healthy metabolic state, insulin opens that door by triggering GLUT4 to move from inside the cell to the cell membrane surface, essentially bringing the door to where it can be used. In insulin-resistant states, that process is impaired. The doors stay inside. Glucose cannot enter efficiently. Nitric oxide restoration from dietary beetroot provides what researchers call insulin-independent GLUT4 translocation, meaning it can trigger those glucose transport doors to open even when the insulin signaling pathway is compromised. This is not theoretical. Researchers at Maastricht University Medical Center studied 61 adults with type 2 diabetes over 12 weeks using DEXA imaging and glucose clamp methodology, considered the gold standard for measuring insulin-independent glucose uptake, and found a 23% improvement in peripheral glucose disposal in the beetroot intervention group compared to placebo. 23% improvement in the fundamental cellular process of glucose uptake, independent of insulin signaling. Mechanism 3, betaine and homocysteine reduction for receptor structural integrity. Beets are one of the richest dietary sources of betaine, a compound derived from the degradation of choline. Betaine's role in insulin receptor health is indirect but profoundly important. Elevated homocysteine, an inflammatory amino acid that accumulates when methylation pathways are impaired, has been consistently shown to directly damage the tyrosine kinase domain of the insulin receptor. The tyrosine kinase domain is the active site, the molecular engine of the receptor. When homocysteine attaches to and damages this domain, the receptor loses its functional capacity regardless of how much insulin is present. Betaine donates methyl groups in the homocysteine to methionine conversion pathway, directly reducing circulating homocysteine levels. This is not theoretical mechanism. Researchers at the Jen Mayer Usta Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University analyzed data from a prospective cohort study following 4,800 participants over 18 years and found that individuals in the highest quartile of dietary betaine intake showed 42% lower rates of insulin receptor dysfunction, markers compared to lowest quartile consumers. The insulin receptors were being structurally protected through dietary betaine intake over years and decades. Now let me give you the exact 7-day protocol based on what the clinical evidence actually supports, because the dosing and preparation method matter enormously for bioavailability. The core protocol is this: 1 medium raw beetroot, approximately 150 grams consumed daily, prepared correctly, at the right time of day. Here is the preparation method that maximizes the active compound delivery. On the night before day 1, wash and peel 1 medium beetroot. Grate it finely using a box grater. Do not cook it. Cooking at temperatures above 70 degrees Celsius begins degrading betalain compounds. Combine the grated beet with 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed olive oil. The fat is necessary for betanin absorption, which is a fat-soluble pigment, and the juice of half a lemon. The ascorbic acid in the lemon dramatically enhances nitrate bioavailability by protecting nitrite from being converted back to inactive compounds in the digestive process. Add a small pinch of sea salt. Allow this mixture to sit covered in the refrigerator overnight, at least 8 hours. The resting period allows enzymatic activity to begin breaking down the cell walls and improving compound release. Consume this preparation within 45 minutes of waking. Do not eat a large meal for 60 minutes after consumption. The reason for the fasting window is specific. Insulin presence in the bloodstream during beet compound absorption competitively inhibits the GLUT4 translocation effect from nitric oxide activation. You want the nitric oxide to drive glucose transport during a low insulin state window. This is the clinical pearl that most written protocols miss. If you exercise in the morning, consume the beet preparation 60 to 90 minutes before your session. Muscle contraction itself is another pathway for GLUT4 translocation, and the combination of nitric oxide activation plus exercise induced GLUT4 signaling produces synergistic glucose uptake improvement that far exceeds either in isolation. Regarding duration, the betalain NF-kB suppression pathway shows measurable effect within 72 hours on inflammatory markers. The nitric oxide restoration effect is active within 2 to 3 hours of consumption, but the receptor structural repair through homocysteine reduction via betaine, that operates on a longer time scale, typically becoming measurable at the 21-day mark. So while you will notice changes in energy stability and post-meal glucose sensation within 7 days, the deeper structural benefits accumulate over the following 3 to 6 weeks of consistent practice. From my clinical experience reviewing patient outcomes, here are 4 additional protocol details that dramatically amplify results and that almost no one mentions. First, do not use beet juice from commercial bottles. The pasteurization process required for shelf stability destroys approximately 60 to 70% of betalain content and significantly reduces nitrate levels. If you want a liquid option, use a cold-pressed juicer at home and consume immediately. The oxidation window for fresh beet juice compounds is under 30 minutes after pressing. Second, chew the grated preparation thoroughly. Nitrate to nitrite conversion begins in the saliva through the action of specific oral bacteria. Swallowing whole pieces or drinking the juice too quickly bypasses this critical first conversion step. You need contact time in the mouth with your salivary glands active. Take at least 5 to 7 minutes consuming the preparation. Third, avoid using antibacterial mouthwash within 2 hours before or after the beet preparation. Studies published in Free Radical Biology and Medicine demonstrated that antibacterial mouthwash destroyed the oral bacterial population responsible for nitrate conversion, completely eliminating the nitric oxide production pathway from dietary nitrates. The mouthwash essentially neutralizes one of the 3 primary mechanisms. Fourth, combined with 10 minutes of nasal breathing exercise after consumption. Nasal breathing has been shown to directly stimulate nitric oxide production in the paranasal sinuses. This compounds with the dietary nitrate pathway, creating what researchers describe as a dual-source nitric oxide load, one from diet, one from respiratory physiology, that further enhances the GLUT4 translocation effect. Let me also tell you the 3 mistakes I see most consistently that cancel the benefits of this protocol entirely. Mistake 1. Consuming beet with high-sugar foods simultaneously. If you blend beet into a smoothie with banana, mango, or sweetened yogurt, the glucose spike from those foods triggers an insulin surge that blocks the insulin-independent GLUT4 mechanism before it can operate. Keep the morning beet preparation separate from any high glycemic foods. Mistake 2. Cooking the beet at high temperatures and then hoping to get beet-alain benefits. Roasted beet is delicious. It is a perfectly healthy food. But for the specific anti-inflammatory receptor repair benefits from betalain compounds, raw or very lightly steamed beet steamed for no more than 8 minutes at low temperature is required. The NF-κB suppression mechanism specifically requires intact betanine and isobetanine structures. Mistake 3. Inconsistency. The homocysteine reduction pathway through betaine requires consistent daily intake to produce measurable drops in circulating homocysteine. Missing 3 or 4 days per week means you are never maintaining adequate betaine levels to drive the receptor repair mechanism. The 7-day trial works because it establishes the daily habit before evaluating results. Let me bring everything together clearly before we close. Here is what the science actually tells us about this purple root and insulin receptor health. Beetroot contains 3 categories of biologically active compounds: betalains, dietary nitrates, and betaine, each operating through distinct and complementary molecular pathways to address different layers of insulin resistance. The betalains suppress the inflammatory NF-κB switch that chronically damages insulin receptor proteins. The dietary nitrates restore nitric oxide levels that enable insulin-independent glucose transport through GLUT4 translocation. The betaine addresses the structural integrity of the receptor's active site by reducing homocysteine-driven damage. Together, these 3 mechanisms address insulin resistance at the receptor level, not simply at the level of glucose intake, which is why this intervention produces a qualitatively different effect than simple dietary carbohydrate restriction. You are not just managing glucose flow, you are repairing the infrastructure that handles it. The 7-day protocol gives your body enough time to experience the short-term benefits: reduced post-meal energy crashes, more stable morning blood glucose, reduced inflammatory sensations, while beginning the longer-term receptor repair process that reaches full expression over 3 to 6 weeks of consistent practice. Your metabolic health is not fixed. Your insulin receptors are not permanently broken. The biological capacity for receptor repair, for inflammatory suppression, for restored glucose transport, all of it exists in your body right now. These systems are built into your cellular biology. They are waiting for the molecular signals that tell them the environment is safe enough to activate. The preparation I just described to you can send those signals starting tomorrow morning with a vegetable that costs less than $2 at any grocery store in the country. You have more control over this than you have been led to believe. The pharmaceutical narrative around insulin resistance is one of progressive decline and lifelong medication management. But the cellular biology tells a different story, a story of systems that respond, adapt, and repair when given the right inputs. 7 days. 1 purple root, prepared correctly, consumed at the right time. That is the starting point. If this information added value to your understanding of metabolic health, please share this video with someone you care about who is navigating blood sugar challenges. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, take 2 seconds to do that now. It is free, and it ensures you do not miss the next video where I go deep on the specific breakfast combination that has been shown to reduce fasting insulin levels by up to 27% within 30 days. That one surprises almost everyone who sees the research. Now, before I close, I want to address something that I hear from patients and viewers consistently. and that I think represents one of the most important mindset shifts required to make this protocol work long term. People approach blood sugar management as a crisis response. Something goes wrong, the diagnosis comes. The A1C number is alarming. The doctor recommends medication, and suddenly there is intense motivation to change. The Purple Root Protocol gets implemented with full rigor. Results begin appearing. Energy stabilizes. Post-meal crashes reduce. The morning glucose numbers start moving in the right direction. And then, over weeks and months, as the crisis feeling fades, the consistency begins to slip. The grated beet preparation takes a few extra minutes, and some mornings that feels like too much. The overnight soak gets skipped. The olive oil and lemon get left out. I understand this pattern. I see it constantly. And what I want to communicate directly is this. The receptor repair mechanisms we discuss the structural restoration of the insulin receptor's tyrosine kinase domain through betaine-driven homocysteine reduction, the NF-κB suppression through beta-lane activity, the GLUT4 translocation through nitric oxide restoration. All of these mechanisms require continuous presence of the active compounds to maintain their effect. The NF-κB pathway does not stay suppressed for weeks after a single exposure. The nitric oxide production from dietary nitrate has a half-life of hours. These are not one-time repair events. They are ongoing maintenance signals that require consistent daily input. Think of it this way. Your body's insulin receptor environment is under constant inflammatory pressure from the same dietary landscape that damaged it in the first place, the refined carbohydrates, the seed oils, the ultra-processed convenience foods that the modern food environment makes difficult to avoid entirely. The beetroot protocol does not change that environment permanently with a course of treatment. It provides a daily countersignal, a molecular input that continuously suppresses the inflammatory pathway and supports the repair pathway against the background pressure of the modern dietary environment. This is why I emphasize the 7-day trial as a starting point rather than a complete intervention. 7 days is enough time to experience the short-term physiological signals that tell you the mechanisms are working: the energy stability, the reduced post-meal fatigue, the morning glucose improvement. Those signals are important because they provide the experiential confirmation that motivates the longer-term consistency required for the deeper receptor repair benefits. After the 7-day trial, if you have experienced those initial signals, the question becomes whether you are ready to commit to 30 days of consistent practice. The 30-day mark is where the homocysteine reduction begins to produce measurable changes in receptor structural integrity, where the underlying infrastructure repair becomes meaningful. And at 60 days of consistent practice, the combination of structural repair and ongoing anti-inflammatory maintenance creates a qualitatively different metabolic baseline than where you started. One last practical point about sourcing that I want to address because it affects results significantly. The beta-lane and nitrate content of commercially grown beets varies enormously based on soil quality and farming practices. Conventionally grown beets from depleted soils may contain only a fraction of the active compound concentrations found in organically grown beets from nutrient-rich soils. If you have access to a farmer's market or can source beets from a producer who uses regenerative growing practices, the active compound density will be substantially higher than typical grocery store beets. If you cannot access higher quality fresh beets, another option is organic beet root powder from a reputable supplier that tests and publishes beta-lane content. Look for products specifying at least 100 milligrams of beta-lanes per serving. This is not a supplement per se, it is a concentrated whole food powder, but it provides a standardized and consistent active compound dose, regardless of seasonal variability or sourcing limitations. The protocol I have laid out for you today is grounded in mechanisms that are understood at the molecular level, supported by human clinical research demonstrating meaningful and measurable outcomes in people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and implementable tomorrow morning with a vegetable available at every grocery store. The biology is clear. The research is real. The question is simply whether you are ready to make the preparation part of your morning for the next 60 days and give your insulin receptors the molecular environment they need to begin functioning the way they are designed to.